We are going to talk about working with selections. In this lesson, we get the opportunity to learn about the selection tools and how to use them. About selecting and pixel selection tools. When you want to edit a specific area of a pixel, you can use a two-step process. First, you need to select or mark the area you want to change using one of the selection tools. And then second, use another tool, a filter, or other feature to make changes, such as removing the selected pixels to another location or applying a filter. When a selection is active on a pixel layer or mask, changes apply only to the selected area, and the areas outside that selected area will remain unaffected. There are 4 files that we are going to work with in this particular lesson, so you want to make sure that you open the lesson files from the lesson 3 folder, and then you are going to make sure that you save them in your Photoshop folder and your homework folder for lesson 3. I'm going to go to File and Open. Navigate to mine. Here are my lesson files. Here is lesson 3. And I'm going to go ahead and open 3 of the 4 just to cut down on a little bit of time. The first one we are going to work with is going to be the 03 Select Subject Start, and it is the JPEG. All right, and then I'm going to hold my control key down. The next one that we are going to work with is 03 Object Selection Start. Both of those are JPEGs, as you can see. And the third one that we're going to work with is 03 Remove Background Start. That one is a Photoshop file, okay? And we're actually going to work with this one twice, but that's okay. I'll open that at the very end. I'm going to go ahead and click Open. Okay, and Photoshop is getting all of that together. All right, the first thing that we need to do before we begin working on this lesson is to go ahead and resave. So I'm going to go ahead, and this first one that we're going to work with is 03 Select Subject Start. It is a JPEG. I'm going to go to File and Save As. Again, you want to make sure you're saving this in your Photoshop and your homework folder, and then you should have a folder for lesson 3 so that you can just save all of the files that you need to submit in there, and then you'll just be able to zip or compress just that one folder to submit. Okay, I'm going to change this to working. So 03 Select Subject Working. Now this one is a JPEG. This is very important. All right, you need to make sure that you click this downward facing arrow and select Photoshop. Very important, okay? Now, I have already worked this lesson, so I'm going to save this just on my desktop, but you need to save it in your file folder. Okay, now when it's done correctly, you can check your tab, your open tab up here at the top, and you can see it is 03 Select Subject Working.psd. So you're ready to roll. All right, automatically selecting a subject. If you need to select a visually prominent subject in an image, you can use the Select Subject feature. You will see an animated selection marquee appear around the subject. Now you can access this in one of several different places. You can go to Select and Subject, okay? You can also come down here and use the Select Subject button on the contextual taskbar. You can also find, I just happen to have the object selection tool highlighted, and in the options bar at the top, you can see that the select subject is also there. You can also find, you can work with it in the quick actions portion, depending on what is selected, okay, over here in your properties panel. And then there's also select and mask, okay, so there is a couple of different ways that you can access the select subject feature. Okay, so this is a great image, and we are going to work with selecting the young lady that you see right here into this background image. All right, so I'm just going to use my contextual taskbar and go ahead and click the select subject. Photoshop is going to analyze the picture and you can see that it nicely selected the young lady that you see, and there's the animated dashed lines around her. So that has been selected properly. Then up in my menu bar at the top, I'm going to go to Layer and New. And down at the bottom, Layer via Copy. Okay, by copying, it leaves the original young lady in the background image. Okay, you can kind of see from the Layers panel over here, the little thumbnail view, that she's still there. So basically, it just put another copy perfectly on top, pixel for pixel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select the name Layer 1, and we are going to rename this as Woman. Okay, with that layer selected, the woman layer in the layers panel. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I have my move tool selected. Okay, now you can resize this by merely dragging one of the bounding boxes from one of the upper corners. I selected and hovered over it and clicked, and then up in my options bar at the top, as long as you have the button selected to maintain aspect ratio, what you change in the width will be reflected in the height. Okay, and they just want us to go ahead and change this to 110%. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click to commit my transformation, or you can press enter on your keyboard, and you can see now we have a duplicate of the lady on top of the lady, whereas before we resized it, you couldn't tell that there was really a duplicate there other than by looking in the layers panel. Now you can see the difference. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I am going to hide. I'm going to turn off the deselect for the show transform controls. I mean, you don't have to, I just did. And then I'm going to hide the enlarged picture of the woman. Now I'm going to select the background layer one more time and click the button to go ahead and select the subject again. Okay, now once that is selected, notice in the contextual taskbar at the bottom, there is a remove button. So I'm going to go ahead and select the remove. And you can see here, removing the area, removing uses generative AI, okay, but does not use generative credits. So now you can barely see a little bit of an outline, nothing that's going to be really noticeable, okay? So notice that there is now a layer above that says remove tool edits, okay? So you can toggle on and off and see the visual changes, that how she goes kind of hidden, if you will. Now I can go ahead and select the woman layer that we resized to 110%, and now I can show that layer, okay? So there's the steps on how we can automatically select a subject, okay? And then I'm going to do a Control S and make sure that I save this one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this one. The next one that we are going to work with is 03 object selection start, and it is a JPEG. Okay. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is come up here and do a file save as. Again, you need to save this where you are saving your homework for lesson 3. And I'm going to change this to working. Again, this is a JPEG. It has to be saved as a Photoshop file because we are working with the layers panel. So you want to make sure in the save as type, you click the downward facing arrow and select Photoshop. So it's 03 object selection working, and it is a Photoshop file. Double checking my open tab here, make sure that it has been named correctly. And I'm just going to zoom in on this just a little bit so that you guys can see. All right, so we are working with this middle penguin here, okay? All right, the object selection tool is similar to select subject, but it gives you a little bit more control. Its keyboard shortcut is W. All you have to do is hover over the subject you want to select and then click. And the object selection tool will identify and select that for you. Okay, so I'm going to press that, and this is the object selection tool. Okay, this is the one you want selected. So I'm going to hover over this middle penguin, and I'm going to go ahead to click to select it. Okay. All right, so if we look at this, it did a pretty good job of selecting the penguin, but down here, okay, we have a few areas that we need to also include. Okay, so you want to make sure that adding to the selection button in the options bar at the top is selected. And then if you come down here, you can actually kind of draw a marquee and use it to select. Notice that the pink area is still outlined, but now you can see on the left side of the penguin's foot area that the selected area with the dancing animated lines is now been included with the shadow. We want to actually come down here and do the exact same thing and highlight the areas that you see here. Okay, so it did a pretty good job getting everything. There is just maybe a minor little piece right here and maybe a little piece right here. If you want to try to include that in here, you can. Okay, however, this is something they address in the book, and now you can see it on screen. You get a little dialog box, could not find an object to select. There may not be enough edge contrast, or the object might be too small. Okay, you can always zoom in on it if you want to, or I can show you a very quick and easy way to clean that up a little bit if you would like to. I don't think the book has you clean it up a little bit. I think they just have you to select what you can of the shadow, and then you could go ahead and like remove it. Okay, but I'll show you that little tip anyway. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is come down here in our contextual taskbar at the bottom, and then we can go ahead and click the remove button. Okay, so we're going to allow Photoshop to the ability to do its thing and remove the area that the penguin and most of the shadow that we've seen at the bottom. Okay, all right, so here we go. This doesn't look bad at all. Okay, does not look bad at all. So if I come up here and fit this on screen, okay, this looks fine the way it is, but I just wanted to show you, and this is a tool that we will use in the future. But if you guys come over here in your tools panel and select like the spot healing brush tool, we can just highlight and kind of drag and drop, and it's gone. So if you want to go ahead and clean up that small little area of shadow, you're welcome to, or you can just leave it. It's up to you. All right, so this is what I wanted to show you from this section. Please make sure that you do a file save and save your changes, or you can Control S on Windows or Command S on a Mac. Okay. All right, so the penguin picture looks pretty great. I'm going to go ahead and close that one since we are done with it. And then the next section I'd like to talk about is selecting complex edges more precisely with cloud processing. All right, selecting an object with a complex edge may require more detailed results with cloud processing. Okay, cloud processing uses a larger machine learning model running on servers that can be more powerful than a personal computer or a laptop. Okay, so basically what this means is we have two layers. Okay, we have the new background that you see here, and then we have a bicycle image that's sitting in front of that background layer. Okay, and we want to basically just have the bicycle, and everything else behind it we want to get rid of. Okay, so this can be easier done using cloud processing than what maybe your laptop, your computer is able to do with its own limited resources. Okay, so this is actually a really great feature. But before we do anything, we need to make sure we do a file save as so that we do not overwrite our lesson file. So I'm going to go to File and Save As. Now this one's already a Photoshop file. All right, so we don't have to change the Save As type. Regardless, wherever this opens from, it automatically wants to go and resave it there. Okay, but remember, you're going to navigate to where you are saving your homework for your lesson 3. In my case, it's my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and select my desktop, and then I need to make sure that I highlight this and change this to, I'm sure you guessed it, underscore working at the end. All right, so this one's going to be 03, remove background working. Okay, we want to maintain that it is a Photoshop file and go ahead and click on save. All right, now in order to tell Photoshop on this particular one, we want to use cloud processing. This will help greatly if maybe your graphics processor or your regular processor that's attached to your motherboard, or even maybe RAM, everything that is required system resource wise within Photoshop working with your computer or laptop. Okay, if you don't have enough in order to be able to do something of this magnitude, that's going to require a lot of processing power, we can use cloud processing. Okay, this is something that is a newer feature. So we need to go to Edit and Preferences, and there is something here kind of right in the middle. It's called Image Processing. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and click that open. And under Image Processing, there is Select Subject and Remove Background. You want to make sure that yours has cloud. Okay, yours, when you open it for the first time, may say device. You just want to make sure that you're using cloud processing here. And then I just left everything else the same. Says processing in cloud requires internet access and is more stable for users who have older devices. Okay, so this may be something that you want to leave to be, as long as you have a good internet connection. Using cloud processing to help you with chapters such as this would actually be very beneficial. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. So I want to make sure that bicycle is selected in my layers panel. Okay, you can see it's kind of highlighted a light gray color over here. And then down in the contextual taskbar at the bottom, I'm going to click on to remove background. Okay, I'm going to let Photoshop do its thing, and notice it was almost instantaneous. So it did a wonderful job removing that background of the image, and it just left the bicycle for us. Now, if we take a look at our layers panel, we still have our new background, okay? We still have the original picture, all right? But we have something that's over here that you can kind of see the little link icon, and then we have a black and white little thumbnail, okay? So basically that is a layer mask. Okay, in a layer mask, white areas reveal or display layer content. Black areas hide layer content, and if you were to see shades of gray, that creates semi-transparent layer areas. Okay, so just having went over that, if we take a look at this little layer mask, we see the white outline of the bike is what we are viewing. Everything else that's in black is being hidden, okay? All right, so I am going to alt-click on that layer mask just real quickly so you can kind of get a better visual of this. So in a layer mask, everything that you see in white is what we're seeing, okay, against the background. Everything that's black is what is hidden. However, if you notice really kind of around the basket area here, do you see kind of the gray areas? That's blending, making kind of more of a semi-transparent area. Okay, so your shades of gray will partially hide. And of course, you can partially see some of it. And that kind of softens a little bit around the edges. Okay, all right, so I'm going to alt-click back that layer mask thumbnail in the layers panel so that we can see the bike against the background. Doesn't that look great? All right, now, this is a step that they don't necessarily include in this section. However, when you are working this section over on the page, that last page of this particular little mini lesson in here, there is a tip, okay? And it says, if you see a harmonized button in the contextual taskbar, when the bicycle layer is selected, click it to make the bicycle fit within the new background more convincingly, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, that's a small little tip that's on the left side of that page. You probably will miss it, but I'm pointing it out. So I'm going to go ahead with the bicycle still selected. Okay, you just want to make sure that it's selected. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Harmonize. Okay, and so basically it's going to generate usually about 3 different little versions of it. Just waiting for it to get done. Okay, and it just has some very subtle changes to it. Okay, it's just nice. All right, so down here in the contextual taskbar or over in the properties panel, you can see 3 kinds of variations. Looking at it, you may not notice much change at all, but let's just kind of flip through these. All right, so here's the first option. Please pay close attention to the bike and maybe the shading around the bike. Okay. Here's the second one. You can kind of notice a little bit of shading in here. And then here's the third one, which is kind of even lighter yet. All right. So that's what Harmonize does. It's a great little feature to kind of clean up and add some polished finishing touches to your project. All right. I'm going to do a Control S because I'm on Windows. You want to just make sure that you are saving this. All right. Going to go ahead and close this out. Now, I said that we were going to cover 4 files in these sections in this particular lesson, and now we're going to talk about that 4th one, okay? And it's on selecting a sky. But first, I need to go ahead and open that one, okay? Since it's one that we started with and I have to reopen it, this is why it's really important that you don't overwrite your lesson files. So I'm going to navigate back to my folder for Photoshop, go back into my lesson files in lesson 3, and now we're going to go back and use the 03 select subject start. All right, so that's the one you want to reopen. It's the one with the really pretty sky, and it's got the young lady, you know, up on the hill. Okay, so selecting a sky. You can retouch the sky in an image by making it more blue, darkening it, or replacing it with the sky command. And the sky command is actually under select and sky. Okay. All right. So before we do anything, we need to resave this. So I'm going to go to File and Save As. Going to navigate to my desktop. You're navigating to where you're saving your lesson 3. Okay, now we're saving this and we are changing the name, okay? So I'm going to delete off everything past 03 underscore. It's sky underscore selection underscore working. And because this is a JPEG, we need to make sure in the save as type, we're changing this from a JPEG to a Photoshop. Okay, you have to make sure these are all Photoshop files, all right? So 03 sky selection working Photoshop. Go ahead and click on save. Look at the open tab. It has been resaved correctly. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to select the sky, okay? At the beginning of the lesson, we selected the young lady. Okay, now we're going to work with the sky. That is a pretty sky regardless, but we're going to tweak it just a little bit to make some very subtle but simple changes to it. I am going to go to Select and Sky, and I'm going to allow Photoshop to come in and select that for me. Now we can see our animated dashed lines. Okay, you can see that they run around the tree. They go all the way on the exterior part of the image, come over here across the hilly mountain area, and we can see how it is actually going around the young lady. Okay, just the upper part of her body. And now what I need to do is then go to Layer and New and Layer via Copy. Okay, so if we stop right here for just a moment and take a look at the Layers panel, we have the original background layer, okay? But if I toggle that off, you can actually see how Photoshop selected just the sky. Isn't that pretty cool? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on both of these. And then up in my menu bar at the top, I'm going to go to Image and Adjustments and Shadow and Highlights, which is towards the bottom. Okay, they're going to have us change the shadow and watch the subtle changes to the sky. Okay, if not, you could miss it. I'm going to change the shadows to 0. Notice this upper right corner here kind of darkened down a little bit. And our highlights, I'm going to change this to 10. And when I did that, the rest of the sky just kind of sharpened and darkened just a little bit because we adjusted those highlights. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Okay. And then I'm going to do a Control-S and save. All right. Now, the lesson actually ends with talking about manual selection tools. In the Tools panel, manual selection tools are grouped together. Okay, so let's take a quick look at these, okay, just in our Tools panel. All right, we have content-based selection tools, okay? So this would be our quick selection tool. All right, so that rapidly expands the selection as you drag by looking for distinct and relative regions of content in the image. All right, so if we tap W on our keyboard, okay, there is the quick selection tool is housed together with object selection and magic wand. Okay, so it's this one right here. It's this tool right here. All right, we have color-based selections, and that's our magic wand. All right, and so that tool selects part of an image based on how similar they are in pixel color to the pixel that you clicked with the tool. Its keyboard shortcut obviously is also W, but this is what that one looks like. So I wanted you guys to see what the tool in the Tools panel looks like. And then we have geometric selections, and these are located right here, okay? Rectangular marquee tool selects a rectangular area. Elliptical marquee tool selects an elliptical area. Their keyboard shortcut is M. There is also single row marquee and single column marquee, and you can use that to select either a 1 pixel high row or a 1 pixel wide column, and then you can also drag to draw the shape to make that larger. Okay, and then we have something called freehand selections. So the selection brush tool lets you mark the intended area using paint. When you switch to another tool, the area you painted becomes a selection marquee. There's also the lasso tool, which traces a freehand selection around an area as you drag the tool. Okay. So I wanted to stop here for a moment and show you that this is the selection brush tool, what this looks like, okay? The keyboard shortcuts for this grouping of tools is L. And then the one I just talked about is the lasso tool. It really does look like a lasso. Then we have polygonal lasso tool, okay? And you can see that that's what that tool looks like. That tool lays down straight line segments around an area as you click the tool to mark the end of each segment. All right, and then the last tool covered is the magnetic lasso tool. And it looks very similar to the polygonal, but it looks like it has a little magnet in the upper right-hand corner. And that tool automatically follows edges and can be effective when the area you want to select is well defined by a color break contrast. So you need to have good contrast, okay? You can click to set an anchor point and then carefully trace around the edge, allowing that magnetic lasso tool to place anchor points around that edge of the object, okay? And of course, again, the grouping, the keyboard shortcut for those is L, okay? So you'll actually find that a lot of these selection tools can be used kind of the same, okay? So we could totally come over here and use one of these selection tools to select the young lady, okay? There's also object selection and then select subject. So a lot of these tools you could find overlap. All right. This is the end of the lesson for today on working with selections. So just make sure you have all of your files saved correctly in your folder, and then you could go ahead and zip that and get that submitted.